Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Rick dropping in on you. Normally, I would record the um, presentations and engagements when it comes down to the Black voice, allowing me to do whatever edits I need to do. But I am actually streaming to you guys live because I want to talk to you about my passions, my intent as we close out this year. I want to talk about the things that matter to me, the things that I have fought for and worked for and pushed for more than 30 years. That's how long I've been in this game. I've been fighting for a long time, and I am committed to doing the work that is necessary on my end, but it definitely requires more than just me. Before I get started, I want to say that if you appreciate what you're seeing, click the like button. If you are encouraged, informed, educated by what you see, share it and subscribe. It's so necessary. And lastly, but definitely not least, if you believe in the work we're doing, a lot of which you'll hear about as we talk about what needs to be done moving forward, as we talk about what we failed to do to this point. If you believe in the work we're doing, if you believe in what you will see and hear here, we need your support. We are currently on a fundraiser boost to raise $10,000 by the end of this week to support a number of different things, but primarily the research that we have going on, which I'm going to share with you, that's directly related to mental health, mental illness, and its impact on the home, its impact on the community, its impact on mass incarceration and homelessness, and how we are in a crisis in that area, and it's getting worse. We're going to talk about suicidation in the Black community and how there's a spike in suicidation and what we need to do about it. And we're going to make it all come together in this experience we call living in America. Again, I've been doing this for now 30 plus years. I became fascinated with human behavior at an early age. I became committed to the idea of being a difference maker in the world of human behavior in 1985 when I saw Dr. Frances Cress Welsing appear on the Phil Donahue show to defend her Cress theory of color confrontation. At the time, I was a junior in high school, and I've never looked back. I've had the pleasure of studying some of the great minds in the area, Frantz Fanon, Dr. Naim Akbar, my favorite, Dr. Amos Wilson, and some of those I call colleagues and peers now, Dr. Joy DeGruy, Dr. Howard Stevenson, those who are operating the area of social behavior, social progression, and psychology as an Afrocentric idea, which is something important that we're going to talk about, the difference between a Eurocentric approach to psychology and sociology and an Afrocentric approach, and why there's a demand and a need for scientific research and study through the lens of Afrocentricity versus what we're getting. For instance, there's a wealth of empirical data available on a number of different topics that we need to broach as a race. The problem is the quantitative data is there, but the qualitative interpretation of much of the data lacks because it's interpreted through a Eurocentric lens that does not consider the uniqueness of the Black culture, the Black experience, and it leaves us lacking. And we need to have these discussions on an educated level. We need to be able to make educated decisions. We need to be able to create educated strategies. And we can't do that without the data. I have spent my life doing this research. And to be honest, I have not gotten any support in doing it. And I want to talk about the cost of our ignorance. And I'm going to start with the cost of research. And I'm going to show, once I tell you the cost of research, I'm going to talk about the studies that I've done, and I'm going to show you the work that I've produced. And then we're going to talk about what needs to be done. I'm not here for pats on the back. I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to prove myself. I'm here to make a point about where we're failing and how we're failing. And we need to have this discussion. I've challenged people to get behind me, but they haven't. But it didn't stop me. About 20 years ago, I took one of my profitable companies, Odyssey Entertainment, and I broke it into several pieces. One piece went to Odyssey Media Group, which is now Odyssey Media Group in publishing. Another part was the Odyssey Project, where I was going to be actively and constructively moving in the community. I have always been involved, but it's always been on a passion move. Something moves me, I get involved and I do whatever. This was going to be a dedicated effort of taking the research that I have done and actually putting it into movement, into action, into practical application, program development, program implementation, and further research. The Odyssey Project has a research center. And so here's the first cost. Average scientific research conducted from ground one up can range anywhere from a very short, brief, small unit of analysis, small sample size research, $15,000, up to the upper echelons of $100,000, and it can easily go into the millions. The average of that is roughly anywhere between 30,000 and 55,000. You don't believe me, you can look that up. That's verifiable data. And so it costs to do research. And again, here's why we need the research. Again, there's extant data, there's extant empirical data, pragmatic information available. A lot of it is quantitative, a lot of it is qualitative, but even the quantitative data has to be broken down into a qualitative measure when you're talking about human behavior, because human behavior has so many variables. You can't numerize it without scale, and your scale is going to be biased based off of who creates the scale. If all of your scales and all of your research is presented, so what happens is you conduct research, you conduct scientific research, you do a study, you can do qualitative, you can do quantitative. Qualitative is more around asking questions and getting responses. Quantitative is more on measurable numbers, measurable incrementation that can be more easily reproduced. But you can do both, and you can do a mixture of both, but you get the results. Now, when you get the results, what do? You have to take what you have in the results and you have to interpret that data. When you interpret that data, you then have to be able to disseminate that data for those who will take it, read it, and use it. Now, obviously, on the highest level, you're talking about dissertations and thesis. This is going to be for other researchers, other people who are considered to be experts in the area, so that they can read it. That'll be peer reviewed and used and shared and published and all that. Then it has to be disseminated and interpreted on another level, where the people who are more likely to actually have to use it are going to be in lay terms. And so what you have to do in that instance is have someone who can determine the pulse of the culture in which this data is being extracted and interpreted, and then turn around and being pragmatically applied. So again, all of this stuff has to be done. And again, it requires what we're at a place where we have all this data. But number one is it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be researched and interpreted, peer reviewed and interpreted differently through an Afrocentric paradigm or an Afrocentric lens. Second of all, there needs to be a lot more studies far beyond the capacity of what I have to do myself or what we can do at the Odyssey Project under the current scale of what we're capable of doing. But it needs to start. It needs to be something consistent. I have followed my colleagues and peers. Dr. Jordan Grover has been great. It was her work and Dr. Howard Stevenson work from which I built and grew out my presentation on African American and adolescent and young adult male violence. So in the research I did on African American adolescent and young adult male violence, the initial premise was to, first of all, combat the idea of black on black crime as a universally exclusive phenomenon. And then it became something to where we had to find the solution. Anytime I do research, it's not just to sit up and say I know something. It's not just to sit up and say that's what it is. It's to find the solution, because if we can find the cause of something, we can, by direct engagement of the cause, change the outcome. So causality is always the determining factor. So the goal is to find out exactly how something happened, where it happened, and what we can do to change it, and to be consistent in that practice, and you get things. So it was out of their work initially that I was able to pull from this and develop Black Men Lead, which became our rite of passage, which is a way of properly socializing young Black males, which reduces their proclivity towards violence, the criminality, and ultimately dropping out of school and becoming incarcerated. It also increases their chances of becoming pro-social in our communities and contributors to homes and families. And it is of absolute importance that we follow through on that. That's just one study. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I've done over the years. The first major study I did was in generational trauma. The first study in generational trauma was brought on in the mid-90s by this constant argument. It's been 100 and something years. Y'all need to get over it. That was the call. And so there was this constant conversation around generational trauma. We had some interesting contributions to that point, but I decided to delve deeply. I decided to look and find out in what ways, we knew social learning theory, just the simple exposure of of children to traumatized parents was going to create a perpetual trauma, but it became much deeper. And I discovered the world of epigenetics, which I have been lecturing and teaching on since then. And epigenetics exposes us to how we genetically pass down trauma, but we also are predisposed to becoming traumatized because of the historical genetic markers that label all the way back to slavery down. But we also are constantly being exposed by way of microaggressions in a society that is inherently and innately hostile towards us, to an environment that literally progressively traumatizes us. And now we live in a state of total complex trauma, which means we have stacked trauma. It is not PTSD in the sense that normally comes from one traumatic experience that's tags us and we have to figure a way to deal with it. We're dealing with a progressive trauma experience in the United States, and it has not ended. We simply have evolved in the way we experience it. They've evolved in the way that they administer it, but we are still being traumatized. And so we come from that. And from that, I moved out of understanding epigenetics, and that way enrolled over into adverse childhood experiences. And from adverse childhood experiences, we learned that when our younger children, through their developmental years, experience certain forms of trauma, we call these ACEs. Everything from parents divorcing, parents becoming incarcerated, parents dealing with mental illness, physical abuse, physical neglect, and so many other things that are literally labeled ACEs, that when they get to 4 ACEs, they have long-term negative health outcomes. So we're not just talking mental and emotional, we're also talking the fact that now these children are in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, and they are 12, a child with 4 ACEs. That means out of the 10 primary ACEs, and there are actually more ACEs, but 10 primary ACEs, some of which I've named to you, if you get 4 of those, you're 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. You are 2.5 times more likely to develop some certain chronic illnesses, 4 times more likely to develop certain cancers, 4 times more likely to develop ischemic heart disease, which is the #1 killer in America. And I can go down the line of health outcomes directly tied to social experiences within the home that are considered adverse childhood experiences. So then there is a direct connectivity. Now, we've always known in the field of psychosomatics, the mind and the brain are connected and the experiences are realized. But we're now learning that at a higher level. So we could get into that too, but I did that. So I did that. Out of that came, generation trauma, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences. And in that, I shared it with y'all with Born in Captivity, Psychopathology is a Legacy of Slavery, which I talk about a great deal, epigenetics, multi-generational trauma, The Undoing of the African American Mind. This is book number 23. The other one was book number 19. And I go on in those two books alone. It's just so much of what I've spent my life studying. And it's not just to sit up and say, I wrote a book and I gave it to you. It's to sit up and say, hey, look, we need to look at these things. We need to ask these questions. We need to be prepared to delve into it. We need to talk about how our thoughts are impacting our health, how our experiences are impacting our health, how our cultural nuances that are in many ways different and oftentimes exclusive from the experience of the Eurocentric contributors to our society that determine our policies in the workplace, our policies in school, our policies in legislature, and so many other ways. So in our workforce, in our schools, everywhere we look, we are experiencing laws and behaviors and environments and atmospheres that are not considerate of the unique experience that we've had in this particular country. And because of that, there's this constant microaggression or force that moves to us, and it has a neurobiological impact on how we are progressing. We are literally dying slowly daily just by existing in a place that we have not yet learned to manage. We've learned to tolerate it. We are an extremely resilient people, but we are not functioning at our best because we don't know how to manage and operate, because we haven't truly gotten through it. We had the greats that come along, and I don't want to pretend that all of a sudden I popped up and discovered sliced bread. No, I've taken things that I've learned from those that came before me with an immense appreciation for their brilliance. And I just decided that it was time to explore beyond what we had been given. The great Carter G. Woodson, the great Francis Cress Welsing, the great Dr. Naeem Akbar, Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Joy DeGruy, Dr. Howard Stevenson, Dr. Umar Johnson. Like him or love him, the dude is brilliant. Personality wise, he drives people crazy and all the other stuff he has going on. But in his research and what he presents, when you study that stuff, it's verifiable. You cannot question it. The dude is brilliant. You have to get past the messenger to get the message. Sometimes Dr. Claude Anderson, these people in many different ways have talked to us about the things that are at the cusp of what we are experiencing in this country. And we need to get over the hump. We need to get past the emotional element and component of our experiences. We need to get past the frustration. There's a reason why we aren't taken serious, because we are still in the infancy stages of problem solving. In the infancy stages of problem solving, we're roughly around the age that you would find a toddler, the toddler who throws temper tantrums. That's all a riot or a riot or a protest is. It's a collective temper tantrum. It's saying I'm not happy about something, but I don't have the power to change it. That's what a 3-year-old does. He's throwing a temper tantrum because he can't get what he wants, and he can't change the fact that he can't get what he wants. So he's using what he has. He's throwing a temper tantrum to hopefully disrupt the process of the normal day until someone pays attention to him. That's not how we're going to get ahead in this thing. We're going to have to get past throwing temper tantrums. We're going to have to be very, very articulate in our communication with one another. We're going to have to be articulate in our communication of our frustrations and our issues. We're going to have to become unified in our demands upon those who are encroaching and infringing upon our rights, and be understanding and aware of what we're demanding. We don't have an agenda. We don't have protocols. And so one would say, well, what's an agenda? Agenda is a specific plan that is aware of the things that we're saying we wanted. There is specific things that we want, and we are moving towards those things. Well, what are protocols? Protocols are the things that you have in place that says, when this happens, this is what you do. It takes the emotional reaction out of the equation, and it says, when they do this, we do that. When they do this, we do that. It is a protocols. When you look at other people, they're operating from a protocol. They have a set plan of responses to all of the things that could happen. One of the things we lack, and one of the things that I fought with and in working with Dr. Anderson and his wife Joanne, that I realized we don't have enough think tanks. We have Dr. Anderson's Harvest Institute, and we have the Odyssey Project. And I'm talking about think tank. I'm talking about people's minds are actually together in a collective environment, researching and looking at the problems, coming up with solutions and presenting those solutions as viable responses to these things. And we don't have it. Now, on the flip side, they have over 1,300 think tanks that address almost every socioeconomic um, measuring uh, uh, measuring point there is. And they have these things from everything from academia to politics to trade through finance and everything. And so all of these things are working against this small thing. And the thing is, we don't have a thirst for the knowledge. We don't have a thirst for the knowledge. We don't want to know. There's this old thing, this old saying that used to drive me crazy. And my mentor, who is non-black, used to always say it. It used to really tick me off until I couldn't disprove it. It says, if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book. And it's meant to be metaphorical, but I have found it to be quite literal. And it's hard to get us to find the things that can help us because we would rather be entertained. We tend to lean towards sensationalism. We search out things that have no real true intrinsic value, but it makes us feel good. We have trained ourselves to seek escapism because that's all we've had in the past. And the problem with that is there's no true good outcome with escapism. It's simply a way of hiding from the responsibility that there are things that we need to do that we are avoiding because it's work, because it's uncomfortable. And another thing that I found is those of us who have the capacity to develop ideas, to develop strategies, to create protocols, those are the ones that are normally being rewarded by the system with a higher wage, a higher lifestyle, a more quality and higher lifestyle. And that makes them, and I'll say us because I'm in that category, that makes us less likely to rock the boat. So you got a bunch of people who are capable of making a difference who will never really get truly involved in making a difference. Why? Because they don't want to disturb the comforts that they experience. You cannot expect to go all in, be completely pro-black and have a comfortable experience. I can tell you, no matter how well my plans have been set, no matter how much and success I've experienced, it's a fraction of what I could experience if I would have simply sold my people out. If I would have been a voice that would have been a buffer, I would have been a good buffer. A buffer. Why? Because I'm articulate. I know how to relay ideas where people get them. And that's exactly what they would have used me for, to sit up and mislead my people, to sit up and point my people in a way that had no real true value. And my appreciation for Dr. King came comes at the point where he realized he was being used as a buffer, and he transformed and transitioned from the dreamer to the radical. And he only had about a year or so left after that because they knew they had a problem. Why? The communicator had become the rally cry. He was no longer talking about integration. As a matter of fact, he told Harry Belafonte that he was afraid that he had integrated his people into a burning house. What did he mean? He says, I brought them into something that they're not prepared to live. I brought them into something that will literally suck the life out of them. We're giving up all of the things that actually give us power to be a part of something that does not respect or appreciate us. And in fact, we have become a threat. And so what happened was he started to rally about the first trip in 63 to the nation's capital was his dream. It was about integration. The next trip he was rallying for was about the check. It was about reparations. And he was building support, and it wasn't just black support. He was really truly rallying. You couple that with the fact that he became very, very vocal against the war in Vietnam, he became a problem. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't Republicans that did him in. And if you think that I'm just talking, look up the King versus the U.S. government, and you'll find that in 1999, the U.S. government was found complicit in the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it wasn't James Earl Ray that did it. And it goes deep. And I literally watched the video. It was videotaped. The trial was videotaped, and I watched the entire trial. This country is straight up gangster, and we need to know how to operate in it. And so again, we could talk about this and I can tell you all this, but the thing is, we've got to get to a point to where we have a thirst for knowledge, because the knowledge is the potential for the power that we claim we desire to want. It is not power inherently, it is simply the potential for power. You can have knowledge, but if you don't take the knowledge and appropriately apply it in a practical sense to achieve the things that you say you want, it's just simply having knowledge. And we unfortunately have far too many people who are satisfied with simply saying I know. We have so many intellectual masturbating contests, intellectual jousting, so to speak. And instead of coming together and saying, let me take what you know, let me take, I learned and we many times I'm in conversations with people I respect in their own lane of what they do. And we're having conversations and we'll get into a conversation and it's my lane and I'm the quietest person there. And they're asking me, hey, doc, what's going on? Number one is I'm never going to joust for an opportunity to speak. I'm never going to compete with people for time. When you feel like you need to talk, I'm going to let you talk. Second of all, I'm never out of the idea that somebody's going to say something that's going to trigger something in my mind. I can't learn if I'm talking. And yet you'll find people who don't know anything. You can't get them to shut up. And it's so darn going and it's going on. And I'm here to tell you something. I'm trying to get you to see something. We need to rally. And yes, I am pushing for you guys to support the work I'm doing because I'm doing this. And for the person that's wondering why I am here and what reason or what justification I have to ask, if you go back and you look for the 16 and 17 years that I've been online, and I go back way further than that. But if you just look at online, look at the amount of free information I've given, the amount of free services I've given, the number of times I've shown up to jailhouses to help people's sons and daughters, how many times I've fed people. I am consistently down at the juvenile court system, helping out families that are there. And the one thing that blows my freaking mind every time I'm down there is what I don't see. I see black and brown kids. I don't see any white. You think they're not committing crimes? You think they're not getting in trouble? You see what's happening? And we're just running around and we're okay with it. We'll whine and complain about it, but we're not going to put any energy, effort, and time and finance into creating something that works for us. I've been talking to you about mental health for I don't know how long. I've written papers, I've sitting up, I've lectured on it. We have a massive problem. Suicide among Black males 14 to 24 spiked 49% of the last 6 years. The number one category in suicide for girls from the age of 5 to 13, Blacks now lead that category. We can put that old saying that Blacks don't kill themselves to bed. We are burning ourselves at the current time. And we don't understand the causality of it because we don't have enough minds on it to sit up and wrap our head around what's going on. We're not able to keep up with technology and the pressure it produces. That was a study done about 4 years ago on the impact of Instagram specifically on young girls, not young girls of a specific race, but young girls, period, and the danger it creates and how it is a anchor bed of cyberbullying. And for the people who grew up during my time and sit up saying, man, it's no way nobody was killing themselves when they were being bullied. Well, the thing is, you have to understand that as well. When you sit up and say nobody was killing themselves when we were being bullied growing up, well, you had to understand there was a release when we were growing up and we were being bullied. We were being bullied at school. That meant we had about 8 hours of our day that we had to navigate around whoever it was that was bullying us, or we had to confront the bully. And we, and so like with me, the way that I early on in life, I confronted the bully, had a fight with the bully, and found out that, he wasn't bad as he thought I was. And I was actually pretty good with them hands and never had a problem out of bullies anymore. But even for the kid that's just trying to stay out of trouble, don't want to fight, all you got to do is navigate eight hours. You get around enough teachers. You learn how to navigate. You learn how to avoid. Plus, it's only so much they can do as a school when there's an adult around. Cyberbullying, you never get away. Pick up that device that every parent thinks their kid needs as early as 5 and 6 years old, and they're going to school with a darn device that you cannot control. Trust me, with my kids, thank God most of them are grown now. But I mean, I done put everything on them damn things trying to stop them from getting it. And these kids are geniuses at circumventing every freaking protection and stop you put on it. And they're going to see things you don't want them to see. And we've got to understand that. You got to understand. Are we controlling the screen time when they are around us? Are we sitting up and monitoring? Are we doing periodic unannounced checks of their devices? You're going to find that your kid can be a wonderful kid and be in a situation where things are about to get ugly or have gotten ugly, and you'll never know it. You've got to sit up and be willing to be involved in these children's lives at a level that's going to make both of you uncomfortable. This isn't about being friends. This isn't about being liked. This is about protecting and preparing our children to face a world that's inherently hostile towards them, and not only exist but win, not only compete but win. But you have to know how to do that. It is a constant engagement of what we need. We're not properly socializing our children. I've told you that over and over. When I wrote these two, this was my 16th book, The Miseducation of Black Youth in America. This one is actually in several universities in the African American studies problem. But then I backdoored that with book number 24, which is Academic Apartheid. And it's doing that. And I'm talking about these things not because I want you to go out and buy them. I'm talking about it because in order to fill this book, if anybody who's ever bought one of my books, one of the things that you can say, if you go to the back and you look at the bibliography is probably going to take up about 10 pages minimum, with the list of citations of everything that I've touched and researched and reviewed to be able to effectively and accurately disseminate the facts that are put forth in that particular publication. I'm not talking off the top of my head. I get on and sometimes I talk in very lay terms, the way I talk 90% of the time. I get on and I'm just chopping it up with you, but I'm sharing something with you that I've literally bled and cried and dug when everybody's doing XYZ that no people. I'm in the books, I'm in the research, I'm studying all these things so that I can give my people something to fight for. This stuff doesn't come cheap. I told you the average cost of basic research conducted through scientific method for the sake of producing a outcome that at least at some point graduates you from concept to hypothesis, to theory, to in some instances, and hopefully theorems and solutions. That is average anywhere from 30,000 to 55,000. That's not exorbitant engagement. You can get research that you're talking about on a social level. So you're talking about highly qualitative and some quantitative data, $100,000 easy to conduct this. And what you got to understand is we've got to be able to take and bring down and break apart the entire thing. The first thing that had to be done is you have to take the total idea of psychology as it is in the US and say, okay, this is a westernized Eurocentric idea of human behavior and what's expected and what causes what. And you have to also be able to understand that the primary source of diagnosis is the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which just basically groups symptoms and says, when you have this many of these symptoms, it's going to be this diagnosis or this and this. There's no blood test for it. So it's a highly subjective, flawed concept, and then start to understand that it's more than just what you're getting in symptoms. And you have to be able to break that down and now reintroduce it and integrate it into an Afrocentric sense of awareness and cultural influence and the cultural paradigms and how we live in the lives we experience and what that looks like, and how we now take certain behaviors that in their sense says XYZ about us. But when you know how we move and where we're at and what we're doing, that same behavior means something different over here. Two different diagnoses. We need to be able to do that. We need to take it to the next level. We need to get to a point to where we can truly re-identify ourselves. We're living in an identity crisis because everything that we've been has been based off of what they've told us about ourselves. We even judge one another based on their standards about who we are. We judge one another based on their idea of what is the Eurocentric idea of what's classy, the Eurocentric idea of what's perfect, the Eurocentric ideas of what's beautiful, of what's professional, and all these different things. And we completely lose our own cultural identity about who we are and what makes us unique and special in this world. And we start trying to ascribe to what they say we are, who they say we are, how we're supposed to be act, trying to fit in, trying to be accepted. And we will literally criticize and scold one another for not fitting into a paradigm we're not built to fit in because we don't put in the work. Something my grandfather told me early in life, I had to be 14 years old. And he saw, number one is this kid is exceptionally smart, smarter than what you would normally see, and he's weird. Uh, and I was extremely athletic. I was athletically gifted. I've experienced some success in athletics, so I wasn't the complete visual of the nerd, but I was probably the worst freaking nerd you could see as far as where my mind was. I would rather be inside reading a book than outside playing. Now, when I got committed to sports, I was committed to it. So it was a system to me. You show up, you put this many hours in, you get this result. So what results I want, I put this many hours in to get. That's how my mind works now. Everything is result orientated. If I want that, then what I have to do to get that? If I want to have that, what do I have to do to have that? It's always there. It's there. And this is what I teach my clients at the Visionetics Institute, is that you set the state of what you're going to get. But in all of this, my grandfather told me this when he realized, okay, this kid's different, but he needs to understand something. My grandfather had a second grade education, one of the wisest men I've ever met in my life. He said, "I said, son, don't be the smartest person in the room. And you like to speak. You like to talk. So I'm going to challenge you. For every word that you speak publicly, read 100. Your boy been reading. Your boy has been reading. 24 years ago, while in seminary, for those that don't know, one of my doctorates is in theology. And while in seminary, I'm studying the great revivalist, John Wesley, who is known as the founder of the Methodist movement. The Methodist Church comes from John Wesley, the great revivalist. And Wesley was very open about his struggles with his faith and very methodical about his approach to life. And one of the things that he said, one things that he did when he was really truly trying to establish himself, is he committed to reading 100 books in a year. And at that moment, I committed to reading 100 books a year. I haven't missed yet. Normally it's around 115, 117, 113, so up there. And I read normally roughly 2 books a week and sometimes a little more. And when I started this, I wasn't a speed reader. I have since become a speed reader, so it's a lot easier for me now. It was just commitment. And the thing is, whatever you're serious about, whatever you give priority to, you find a way to get it done. I found in life that the things that you feel you have to do get done. Everything else is dependent upon convenience. But the things that you feel you have to get done, get done. The bills get paid. The children get fed. XYZ. Everything else, man, if I feel like it, I do it. If I don't, I don't. So I made reading a commitment. And then I come to understand in reading, I determined and found out that the average person in America reads less than 1 book a year. The average. So you're talking about there are people that don't read. Because if you have an average of 1 book a year, there's some people reading more, but there's some people not reading any. And so that's the average. But the top performers read on average 4 books per month. So when you look at the road that we go through, we need to be reading more than those who oppose us, because those who oppose us have a built-in advantage. And so the way you overcome the advantage is you have to be more prepared. And those are the things that some of the things I get at. And so I did that. I did the disintegration of the Black family. Out of that came Merging Souls, which is a book, my second book on building strong marital relations. Um, the African American, I already talked about that one. Mental illness, intimate partner violence, and homicide. I've gone into deep views on where that's coming from. And again, we can take all of that. Intimate partner homicide is simply an extension of, in many instances, African American adolescent and young adult male violence. And we need to understand that. Now, this actually happens in equal transgression, male and female. Black women and Black men assault each other equally as far as frequency. The difference is the male has the capacity to be far more devastating in their violence than the female. So you get more real damage done and death. The second leading cause of death among Black females between the ages of 15 and 44 is intimate partner homicide. That's a problem. But we need to understand where the violence comes from. We need to understand the proclivity from violence. That, again, that's socialization. That's the development in the developmental years, from ages up to 7, of how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with things that we don't like and don't approve of? How do we act when things don't go our way? And if we haven't developed the proper response mechanisms to adverse reality, we will tend to act out immaturely. And we get that. We get these young males who don't know how to take it. Number one is because if I'm suffering in the way of identity, then I have a problem when what I do identify with is pulled away from me. So if I don't know who I am in many instances establishing my identity based on what I have and who I'm with, who likes me, who I'm with, and what I have. So what I drive, what I wear, and who I'm with. And if my strongest part of my identity is with this female, that in my mind, because I don't know who I am really, I'm hiding it up under a lot of stuff. But in my mind, I don't know who I am. Because I don't know who I am, I don't think I deserve her. She's hot, she's beautiful, she's sexy, she's smart, she's all these different things. And here I am, I'm just this person. Now, keep in mind that the word just, I'm just this person, because in my mind, I'm measuring her value based on all the things she has that I don't have, that I have to hide under other stuff for. So she's got more than me in those areas. And so I don't think I deserve her. And now I got her. So now my ego is being served and my identity is based on having her. So when she decides she no longer wants me, my ego takes a hit. And at the same time, I crash in the way of identity. I no longer have anything that tells me I'm worthy. You took away my worthiness. And the only way a man responds to that is through the instincts, when he does not have a built-in system of response. That comes through socialization. And when the instincts kick in, we are by nature violent and capable of violence. We have to be, because we are the protector species of the species. We are built bigger and stronger for one reason: to be physically imposing in a way that protects those who fall behind us and underneath our covering. So then when that's out of whack and I don't know who I am, I don't see my value in any other thing except the things I have and the person in my life. The moment any of that is disrupted, I start to act out instinctively and I break stuff. I destroy stuff. It's the way I express my discontent. So then what must we do? We must properly socialize young Black males into their true identity of Black manhood. We must rear up strong Black men. And while Frederick Douglass couldn't have possibly known all the things I'm sharing with you now, he was the one that said that it's much easier to raise strong Black youth than to heal broken men. And I'm telling you, as a person who literally applies himself to this on a consistent basis, it is so much easier to do. So again, man, I can't stress enough that we have to do a better job than what we're doing in unity. We have to do a better job in research. We have to do a better job in being involved, sitting around. And here's the thing. This country is in crisis in a way that it hasn't been before. There are all these different advances. The beautiful thing about these advances is, for the most part, they are not advances in technology and advances in opportunity, they aren't restrained or uh, held in by boundaries within the country. I have clients in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in the UK, in Australia, and on and on. So, and I have that because my content can reach those nations, and people can say, I like what he's doing, I like what he's talking about, I want to see what it is. And I get an email, I get somebody that leaves a message on one of my sites, and the next thing you know, I'm working with a person uh, in another country. And now I'm about to start getting my content that deals with personal behavior and personal development, all that stuff, in multiple languages. So even countries that I'm not currently able to move in because the native language isn't something, and most people that don't, speak English, uh, that's going to happen. But here's the thing. There are some things that are going on with this country. So from an economic perspective, there are some things going on with this country from a geopolitical perspective. And what it's going to create is we're going to see people become more desperate. We're going to see, and I mean, not just us, I mean, people who don't look like us are going to become more desperate as privilege starts to decline and the middle class starts to dissipate. I don't know if you've paid attention to it, but the middle class is dissipating. We're rapidly approaching what Orson Welles calls the have and the have-nots. You're either going to have it or you're not, because the middle class was created. It's an illusion. It was created as a buffer class between the wealthy elite and the poor. Because before there was race, there was poverty. And the poverty and the poor came, and the buffer class became that. And the buffer class was predominantly what? White, because they had the privilege. That kept poor whites, privilege kept poor whites from partnering with blacks to challenge the status quo. And because that was a time when a lot of the rebellion in the South with slaves were slaves accompanied by poor, pauper whites. And so what they did is they gave them privilege. Just by existing, you are more important and you're in a better situation just by your whiteness than any black. Matter of fact, in a joke, Chris Rock once said, I want to say it was Bigger and Blacker. I could be wrong, but he stood up and he said that there's not a white man in America that would trade places with me, and I'm rich. He wasn't lying, because there's this notion, this created illusion, this narrative that is written that your whiteness is an advantage. Your whiteness has privilege, and it does. And so one of the things we've got to do is we've got to develop an understanding of how we're going to navigate that, how we are going to move and operate within the scope of what's there and what we need to do. And we cannot in any way defeat something by participating in it. We can't defeat something by being compliant in it. We can't overcome something by acquiescing to it. We have to be willing to move and resist and operate in that way. Look, I could go on and on about the things. The bottom line is we're pushing to raise $10,000 for this research that is specifically aimed at all the nuances and the data necessary to understand how to effectively address mental illness in this community, especially with African American males over the age of 18, which means that it's hard to get them any type of assistance that they resist, but it's ending up with them being homeless, incarcerated, worse, because there's nothing anyone will do until they do something illegal or dangerous. And normally that's after the fact. And so many of them many times end up dead by law enforcement, incarcerated instead of in an institution they can get help in, or harming somebody or themselves. And so what we've got to do is we've got to understand it, because it impacts the home if they're not taken care of. And here's the problem. Many of these men aren't beyond help. Most of them, when properly treated in the right intervention plan with the right type of engagement, can become viable contributors to the community. And that means having a family, having a home, having children, starting a business, all these things that are there. We're constantly seeing men in many different ways being extracted from our community. Mental illness is just one more way that it's starting to exacerbate. And we need to understand how to address that so that we can meet that head on. There's far too many people that are coming to me that have sons who are adults that are struggling with major mental psychosis that they cannot get help for because there's no way to do it without that. And the problem is, I understand we're in a country where they say they're looking out for people's uh, civil rights, but at the same time, families are falling apart, families are being destroyed, um, and we are incarcerating men who need treatment, and it's more prevalent in our community, and it's our responsibility to deal with that. So look, on that note, look, I'm going to get ready to get out of here, but I'm asking you, look in the description box. There are several ways that you can give. You can give through the primary donation processing. You can give through the organization's Cash App. You can give through our GoFundMe account. I don't prefer that because the processing fee for GoFundMe takes so much. You can give specifically to our resource campaign, which is a different link. But whatever you do, show some love, show some support. This is a time that we need to rally. Look, I have loved every minute that I've given to this, over 80,000 hours over the last 30 years on research dedicated to this. And I can't tell you how much time I've spent on actually executing and implementing the things that that I've discovered. And so I am challenging you. We have to get to a point to where we are literally unified. When J. Edgar Hoover was asked in an interview what was the greatest threat to national security, we were in the middle of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. He didn't say the Soviet Union. We had just come out of a missile crisis with Cuba, where they had missiles aimed at the US. He didn't say Cuba. We had all kind of things going on with multiple countries in the Middle East, Arab nations. He didn't name any of those Arab nations. What he said was Black unity. The thing that they feared the most was the unification of Blacks in this country, because they understand with unification comes power. They understand that when we put our minds together and when we sync our energies, when we sync feminine energy and masculine energy, we create a synergistic force, a synergy that is capable of producing out of the combined force more than any individual can produce on their own. It is this force, this connectivity, this spiritual ability to tap into things beyond what people can explain that make us special, that make us exceptional, that make us extraordinary, that make us the things that are constantly copied while we are maligned. They constantly tell us we're not things, but they're constantly drafting from who we are, because they understand. They understand from a genetic perspective who we are. And we need to discover this. We need to catalog this. We need to create strategic programs that allow us to explore the possibilities of what we're capable of doing. But that doesn't happen if we don't get involved. As long as we're individualized, as long as it's just about what I got, what I do, how I'm doing, and that doesn't impact me, we are going to consistently lose ground. And ultimately, it's going to be our progeny, our grandkids, our great grandkids, and their kids and great grandkids who are going to suffer from our inactivity, our lack of focus, our lack of commitment, and our lack of willingness to go the distance for the greater good. On that note, look, I'm gonna get ready to get out of here. I want to thank you guys for sharing your time with me. I don't know if AD Martin is still on here, but I definitely want to let you know I appreciate your time with us, and contributing and sharing on the Black Voice channel, because I'm streaming this on multiple platforms. AD is on our Black Voice channel on YouTube. So I want to say thank you for that. And on that note, look, I'm getting ready to get out of here. Once again, thank you. I hope to see you, but I'm going to be on you this week about this, because at some point, something has to give. I have never backpedaled on my research, even though I've never gotten support on it. And I've covered the cost. I've reached in deep. I've done what I've had to do. I want to take it to another level. I want to do something that leaves an imprint and gives power to the kids that we say are our future. It's time to bless them with something that gives them the elevation they need to go to the next level. So on that note, look, I'm gonna get ready to get out of here, and you guys have an unbelievable remainder of your day.